Anthony Hargrove, a defensive tackle who used to be on the Saints, got 8 games suspended, and Will Smith got 4 games. Dave, how bad do you think? Oh, and there's another guy actually, Scott Fujita, got 3 games. So, Dave, how bad do you think this is going to affect the Saints?
Well, I do think it's going to affect the Saints pretty badly. But they should be able to overcome it if their offense can show up. But they don't have that defense to back them up anymore. Louis, what do you think there?
I think it's not really going to affect them that much because Hargrove is not on the team anymore. Will Smith, I don't even really know a lot about, so I can't give my opinion on it. Billman's going to be a big hit, but I don't think it's going to be as big as people are making it sound because they signed former linebacker from the Falcons, Curtis Lofton, to fill that hole. So I don't think it's going to be that big of a problem. They're still going to be a playoff team, obviously with Drew Brees there. But yeah, it's going to hurt them a lot.
Yeah, wait. What do you think about the Vilma suspension, the biggest one of the whole season?
I think it's way too much. I don't think that really he should have got that. I mean, a whole player getting a whole season compared to everyone else getting 8 games, 4 games, and 3. I think it's outrageous, and I don't agree with it at all. I think 10 games or 11 would have did the trick, but you at least bring them back this season. I don't think you take away the entire season. How do you agree on that? Suspended the entire year?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. 11, 12 games would be good. That he can come back for 5 games, and if the Saints make the playoffs, he'll be able to play in that. A season without pay. That's a lot for him. That should probably affect the Saints. How do you think about Handgrove?
Handgrove, I like Handgrove. He's shown some good stints when he was in Buffalo and Philadelphia. In the Saints, he really did good too, especially helping them get to a Super Bowl. I think that's fair. That's what I thought everyone should have got was around 8 games.
Yeah.
Vilma maybe a little more because he was the most heavily involved. But that's fair for everyone. I think all the games are fair. Dave, do you think they're all fair as well?
Yeah, I agree. All right, now let's get into fantasy.
Okay, so fantasy. We're going to go over a couple interesting topics. What position do you think you go for in the first round? Do you still think it's running back, which has been the most favorite position for fantasy for years, or where would you go in first round?
Well, it would probably depend on where you pick, but if you've got probably a top 3 pick, yes, it's running back with Ray Rice, Arian Foster, or LeSean McCoy. But if you've got 4 through back, if you can get Aaron Rodgers, I would totally take him. That'd be a steal if you can get him anywhere behind 5. So.
Yeah, I agree. I'm thinking receiver. I'm big on receivers. Last year I had A.J. Green, Dwayne Bowe, and Calvin Johnson all together, and Victor Cruz. So I think if you can build around receivers and get at least one solid running back, like someone maybe that's why you do go running back in the first round and get a guy like LeSean McCoy, Maurice Jones-Drew, and then build around. But I think you get a ton of receivers to build around so you can get them as running back / receivers and stuff. But, I would still go running back in the first round unless someone like Calvin Johnson's there and you pick him up, unless there's not a lot of great running backs. So, Dave, what position would you go for?
You mean in the second round?
In the second round, what position would you go for if we eliminate running back? Would you go for running backs or would you go for quarterbacks?
Well,
or even tight ends, obviously, because there's so many great tight ends.
Well, I might actually, eliminate running back.
Say you got a running back in the first round. What position do you go to? Do you go another running back? Do you go quarterback, receiver, or tight end?
Well, I might. It depends. I'd like a quarterback there. I'm a big quarterback guy. I've got Aaron Rodgers in my keeper league. But another running back, just stack up your running backs would be good. I mean, I know Louis last year you waited for a quarterback, and that seemed to turn out pretty well for you.
Yeah, that's always been my strategy because there's going to be guys like the guy I've had for a while, Matt Ryan's always going to be there in the late rounds. And I think you go receiver here. I think if you can get that one really good running back, then you get a great receiver too to go with it. And then I think you focus on running back, receiver, and even tight end, and wait for a quarterback. That's my strategy. I think you get a running back, 2 good receivers, get another running back, and then I think, Dave, do you think there are going to be any? Do you think in a lot of leagues, Gronkowski and Jimmy Graham could go first round, or do you think they'll still fall to the second and third?
Yeah, I still think they're going to fall to the second or third. I know they're very valuable. They'll get you a lot of points, but not as much as the other players that will still be available there.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so next, we're gonna do a versus here, a versus segment. Larry Fitzgerald, receiver of the Arizona Cardinals, versus Andre Johnson, receiver of the Houston Texans. Dave, who would be the better receiver that you would want on your team?
For fantasy?
Yes.
Well, people might underestimate Andre because of last year with his hamstring injury, but in Larry Fitzgerald, I just signed Michael Floyd, but that shouldn't really affect him too much. Shouldn't really take away much of his targets. But so I might have to, but I think I'm gonna have to go with Andre Johnson here. I think he's a great receiver. He can get back on track. He's got a better quarterback in Matt Schwab, and he doesn't really have anyone else around him.
Yeah, I do not. I disagree. I think Larry Fitzgerald has been, obviously Andre Johnson too. They've both been elite receivers for the past 5-6 years. But I'm going to go with Fitzgerald here. I think now with Michael Floyd on the other end of him, I think it's going to take some attention off Fitzgerald. Obviously, there's going to be still a ton of attention when you're one of the best receivers in the league. But I'd go with Fitzgerald here, mainly too because I'm still worried about Johnson's injuries, even though he's not very injury prone. But I think I would just go with Fitzgerald here. I think. But obviously, would you rather have Calvin Johnson over both of these guys?
Oh, yeah, totally. I need that.
Yeah, I think Calvin Johnson's obviously the number one guy. So another one, not a comparison. Now we're going to talk about a certain player, running back of the San Francisco 49ers, Frank Gore. Dave, do you have him as an overrated player or an underrated player?
Well, I don't think he's much of either, but I think he's going to be a little bit more underrated than overrated. A lot of people don't talk about him. He's usually going to fall in fantasy like to the 3rd or 4th round, or maybe even the 2nd, but it depends on the person. But I think he's a little bit underrated. I think he's a lot better than people give him credit for.
Yeah, I agree. I think he is getting older though, and he has some injuries over the past couple of years. But I think he's still underrated. I would take him in the 1st round. I think the 49ers have built their offense around him a lot, and I think actually the signing of a lot of receivers are going to help him.
Yeah, all right. Another thing that should affect Frank Gore is that the 49ers signed Brandon Jacobs and drafted Michael James, so that might affect him a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's a ton of running back competition in San Francisco with Kendall Hunter, Michael James, Frank Gore, Brandon Jacobs. There's a ton of running backs there that are going to want carries. Not all of them are going to make the team. I have the odd man out being Brandon Jacobs. But Kendall Hunter is going to take away a lot of the carries, and even Michael James, they're going to use him as a weapon. He's going to be a fun little toy for the 49ers, and it's going to take away a lot of Gore's carries. So I think I would still avoid him in the 1st round.
All right, next up we're going to talk about if some people have keepers in their leagues. Louis, what do you think you draft if you have keepers?
If I have a keeper, it would obviously depend on who my keepers are. I'm going to do this comparison to my keepers. Since we're talking about it, my keepers, I have a running back and a receiver in McCoy and Calvin Johnson. So I would go receiver again because you do have 2 elite positions with both positions. But I think if you can get another elite receiver there, running backs, there's going to be a lot of good running backs that are going to fall. One of my sleepers is Ryan Matthews. I think he's going to fall in the late rounds, and if you can get someone like him, I think you can build around, get a receiver. So in the 1st round, I would go receiver, but obviously, too, it depends on who's there. If Mike Wallace is there in the 1st round, I'd take him, but it obviously always depends on who's at running back.
All right, well, if I'm going to compare to my keepers with Aaron Rodgers and Michael Turner. I've got the 3rd overall pick, so I might think of going with a running back, just because Turner might not be enough to be my number 1 guy. But there's also great receivers in there, like Louis mentioned, with Mike Wallace, so it really depends on who your keepers are.
Yeah, I definitely agree. That's all great points. So now, another thing, Dave, well, Adrian Peterson's injury, he had a season-ending injury last year that most likely will play in effect this year. Do you think Adrian Peterson's injury is going to affect his fantasy season? Do you think he's still a 1st-round pick in non-keeping leagues, or even in keeping leagues if someone chooses not to keep him? Would you avoid Peterson, or would you pursue him?
Well, I would definitely avoid him. He tore his ACL and MCL, and I just don't think he's going to be the same. He might not. He might make it back for week 1, but when he did start to run, he was out for the whole week after that day. So he doesn't seem to be making too much progress. Well, actually he is, but like I just don't know how good he's gonna do. So I wouldn't take him in the first. He might fall though with this concern. I'd take him in the second though.
Yeah, I agree. I had him last year, and obviously when he's healthy, he's a stud running back. But I think I would avoid him as well. This injury is a serious injury, one of the most serious in the league. And I think you just don't take chances, especially when you're first round. I think you go with the solid pick, and I don't think Peterson is one of those because of that injury. But I think it's going to be a steal though when it comes time when he's healthy again. I think if someone, like you said, if someone could get him in the second round, eventually if you can take time and build great depth on your fantasy team, then it'll pay out in the end. So, Dave, another versus. We're going to go to the two giant receivers, Hakeem Nicks versus Victor Cruz. Who would you rather have on your team and why?
Well, Cruz had a great breakout season last year, but now people might think that he's going to be covered more heavily. But he was covered heavily throughout the playoffs and the last couple weeks, and he still did great. And well, each player is taking coverage off of each player, so they're both very like each other. But I just like Cruz's ability to break away from a tackle, and so I take Victor Cruz.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Victor Cruz here as well. I love Hakeem Nicks. I would take him if he fell in the third round or second, maybe second. But I would go with Victor Cruz here. I had him again. A lot of these guys we've been talking about, I had on my team, and I like Victor Cruz. I think now with the drafting of Ruben Randall, the receiver of LSU, it's going to take even more attention away from Cruz, and it's also going to benefit Hakeem Nicks because people know about what Cruz is all about. One more topic on the verses. It's the battle of the mobile quarterbacks. Dave, Michael Vick versus Cam Newton versus Robert Griffin III. I'll even add in Josh Freeman there because he's another mobile quarterback. Which one of those guys would you have on your team?
Well, I'm going to number 9 from 1 to 4. First, I'm just going to eliminate Josh Freeman. He's not even as close to as mobile to the other three, so I don't think he really fits into this topic. So I put him at number 4. Number 3 would be close between RG3 and I think pick Michael Vick, because Vick's getting old, but he's very injury prone. But when he is playing, he's still great. So that'd be tough. So I might have to say, but I'm gonna have to say that Vick is third. But RG3 just beats him for 2, and number 1 Cam Newton.
My list, I would have Michael Vick number 1. No, I'm going to put Cam Newton number 1. With his mobility and young youth, I think he's a great quarterback to have on your team with his mobility and rocket arm. Number 2, I would have Michael Vick from the Philadelphia Eagles. Vick is just a great quarterback from the Eagles. He has a rocket arm, and he's a veteran, and he has the ability to do great things with his legs and his arm. And then number 3, I have Robert Griffin III. He's a young guy that no one knows about in the NFL. Well, everyone knows about him, but no one knows what he's capable of doing yet. And then Freeman I would put last, but I really like Josh Freeman. I would put him in the Ben Roethlisberger and Matt Ryan category. So, Dave, any more